Welcome back guys. Now in this video let's see what are the different types of hormones. Mainly the hormones are classified into two types. There are different classifications. Mainly the hormones are classified into two types. One is lipid soluble hormones and water soluble hormones. There are different classifications, like hormones can be divided into peptide hormones, amino acid derived hormones or steroid hormones. But now the classification that I am using, hormones are mainly divided into lipid soluble hormones or water soluble hormones. Now let's see what are the examples of lipid soluble hormones. Lipid soluble hormones includes steroid hormones and thyroid hormones. Both are lipid soluble. See, what exactly do I mean by steroid? Steroid hormones are those hormones which are derived from, which are derivatives of cholesterol. If a hormone that is produced from cholesterol, then that hormone should be called as a steroid hormone. Then what about this thyroid hormones? See, thyroid hormones are also lipid soluble, but thyroid hormones are not steroid hormones. Thyroid hormones are not derivatives of the cholesterol. So the thyroid hormones, they are amino acid derived hormones derived from the tyrosine amino acid. Okay, so it's a amino acid derived hormones. Okay, then what are the examples of water soluble hormones? The examples of water soluble hormones includes peptide hormones and amine hormones. Okay, all other remaining things you can say. Okay, apart from steroid and thyroid hormones, all others are water soluble hormones. Next, what about the storage? How they are different in the storage mechanism? See, lipid soluble hormones like steroids and thyroid hormones, they are never stored, guys. Okay, they are never stored. Usually the lipid soluble hormones, they are never stored, they are produced and used up. Okay, whenever there is a need, they are produced and used up. But the one exception is the thyroid hormones. Thyroid hormones, even though they are lipid soluble, they can be stored. So, right, lipid soluble hormones usually synthesize whenever there is a need and they are not stored. And the exception is thyroid hormones like T3 and T4. So this T3 and T4, they can be stored in thyroid gland. They can be stored in a region called as a colloid. Okay, they can be stored almost up to 2 to 3 months. Okay, that's the one exception. Then what about the water soluble hormones? See, the water soluble hormones like peptide hormones and amine hormones, they can be stored in vesicles. You can store them. But the lipid soluble hormones, they are not stored, and what is an exception? Thyroid hormones are the exception. Next, what about their plasma protein binding? Lipid soluble hormones usually they bound with the plasma proteins. They are not traveling in free form. For most of the time, they are bound with the plasma protein. They are binding with some plasma protein. So whenever they are binding with the plasma protein, so automatically their half-life will be more. Anything which is bound in form, anything which is in bound form, automatically their half-life will be more. So that's why the half-life of lipid soluble hormones are more. Exactly opposite thing is the water soluble hormones. Usually they are not bound to the plasma proteins. They are not bound to the plasma proteins. Okay, they are traveling freely. Now, for example, see thyroid hormones. I have told you they are the lipid soluble hormones. Thyroid hormones, they are binding with the T3, which is the most active form of the thyroid hormone. T3 mainly binds with which plasma protein? Albumin. T4, okay, mainly binds with thyroid binding globulins. Estrogens, testosterone, they are all going to bind with which plasma protein called as the sex hormone binding globulins. Cortisol and progesterone, they bind with which plasma protein called as a cortisol binding globulin. So all these lipid soluble hormones, they are binding with some form of a plasma protein. So that's why their half-life is more. Okay, but water soluble hormones, usually they do not bond. They are not going to bind with the plasma proteins. So definitely there will be exceptions in every case. So what is the exception? A water soluble hormone called as a insulin-like growth factor 1, also called as a somatomedian C. Insulin-like growth factor 1, also called as a somatomedian C. It is going to bind with the plasma protein. It's most of the time it is traveling with the plasma protein. It requires its plasma proteins for its transport. Okay. And one more important point about this insulin-like growth factor 1. From where it will come insulin-like growth factor 1? Let me tell you. It's a growth hormone. Whenever the growth hormone, when it goes and acts on liver, when it stimulates the receptor on the liver, it's the liver which is going to produce the insulin-like growth factor 1. It acts like insulin. Okay, it's trying to decrease the blood sugar levels and it helps in the protein synthesis, epiphyseal growth. It's doing. But the exam important point is, it is this insulin-like growth factor 1 which is responsible for the growth spurt. So what is required for the growth spurt? It's not the growth hormone which is required for the growth spurt. It's the insulin-like growth factor 1 which is helping in the growth spurt. And what exactly is growth spurt, guys? Growth spurt means sudden increase in the height. Okay, when you are in the puberty, somewhere around 13 to 14 years of age, you have observed that suddenly you are growing in height rapidly. So that event is called as a growth spurt, and that growth spurt is because of insulin-like growth factor 1. Next, Okay, next. And here also one more exception. What is that exception? See, there is a lipid soluble hormone which is not going to bound with the plasma protein. What is this exception here? That is a DHEA, dihydroepiandrosterone. So this dihydroepiandrosterone, okay, it's a lipid soluble hormone, but it does not require any plasma proteins. Okay, these are the two exceptions. ILGF and DHEA are the exceptions. Next, what about the receptors? See, lipid soluble hormones, the name itself is that they are lipid soluble. They are lipid soluble. So they will cross the cell membrane because our cell membranes are also made up of phospholipids. So lipid soluble hormone, imagine if this pencil is a lipid soluble hormone. So lipid soluble hormones, they will cross the cell membrane. They will enter into the cell. If they are entering into the cell, definitely they will be having receptors within the cell. So lipid soluble hormones like thyroid hormones and steroid hormones, they do have receptors but not on the cell surface. They have the receptors within the cell. Within the cell means, right, if they have intracellular receptors. The receptor may be present in the cytoplasm or the receptor may be present in the nucleus. So the receptor can be an intracytoplasmic receptor or it can be an intranuclear receptor. Now, what are those lipid soluble hormones which have receptor in the nucleus? See, the mnemonic I am giving you here is sex with T3, T4. Okay, just like a mnemonic, sex with the T3, T4. So what exactly is this mnemonic sex with the T3, T4, sir? Sex in sex. What is the letter present here? E. What are the sex hormones? You tell me, what are the examples of sex hormone? Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Okay, these are the right. So in sex, which letter is there? E is there. So E stands for estrogen. So this estrogen, it's having the receptor where? In the nucleus, intranuclear. And vitamin A and D. This vitamin A and D, even though they are not hormones, but I am still telling here, vitamins are also having, vitamin A and D also having the intranuclear receptor. And thyroid hormones, T3 and T4, these are the thyroid hormones, they have the receptor within the nucleus. So estrogen, thyroid hormones, they have intranuclear receptors, but all other lipid soluble hormones, like androgens, or you can say testosterone, progesterone, okay, androgens like testosterone, progesterone, aldosterone. Aldosterone was a recently asked MCQ. Okay, aldosterone receptor is intracytoplasmic, aldosterone. Next, cortisol. Okay, all this they have the intracytoplasmic receptor. Then, what about the peptide hormones or what about the water soluble hormones? See, the water soluble hormones, they cannot cross the cell membrane, they cannot enter into the cell. So then how they are going to mediate their action? See, a water soluble hormone, imagine here I am talking about a cell. Okay, cell membrane, this is the cell membrane. So here I am talking about a water soluble hormone. So this water soluble hormone, you know, it cannot enter into a cell. So definitely they should be having a receptor on the cell surface. So they are having cell surface receptor or cell membrane receptors. Now this X hormone, it is coming and stimulating this receptor. Now once this receptor is stimulated, now this receptor is going to do what? It is going to produce some secondary messenger inside the cell. Now the secondary messengers, what they will do? They will regulate some reaction inside the cell. They are going to regulate some reaction, maybe like glycogenolysis, gluconeogenesis, lipogenesis, lipolysis, something. So what I am trying to say, the water soluble hormones, how they are acting? Are they directly entering into the cell? No, they are not. These water soluble hormones, they are going to act on the cell surface receptors and acts via secondary messenger mechanism. So secondary messenger mechanisms are used by which hormones? Water soluble hormones like peptide hormones. Okay. Now look at here, guys. Now I am going to give you some exceptions. What are the exceptions, sir? Now I am going to tell you about certain, see, water soluble hormones. Usually water soluble hormones are going to act as a secondary messenger mechanism. Later I will explain you in the next videos what are how exactly the secondary messenger mechanism is going to work and what are the different hormones producing different secondary messengers. That will come later. But for now, just trust me. Usually water soluble hormones acts via the secondary messenger pathway, but there are certain water soluble hormones which acts differently. What are they, sir? See, insulin is a water soluble hormone. It is not producing any secondary messenger. It is acting via the tyrosine kinase pathway. Okay, it acts on tyrosine kinase receptor. Now this tyrosine kinase receptor, when it is activated, the tyrosine kinase is activated in the cell and it do some reaction, but secondary messengers are not produced. Secondary messengers like CAMP, CGMP, inositol triphosphate, they are not produced. And few more water soluble hormones like growth hormone, prolactin, leptin, insulin like growth factor 1, okay, they are all acting via Jack-Stat mechanism. Jack-Stat, okay, mechanism. Okay, so not only what are the hormones which are using the Jack-Stat pathway? The Jack-Stat pathway is used by prolactin, growth hormone, leptin. Okay, these are the things. I don't want insulin-like growth factor here. So these are the three important things. Prolactin, growth hormone, leptin, they are all acting via which pathway? Jack-Stat pathway. So tyrosine kinase mechanism is used by which water-soluble hormones? Hormones like insulin and growth factors. Okay, like platelet-derived growth factor, vascular endothelial growth factors. Okay, done. Now anything else is different in their mechanism of action. See, most of the time, the steroid hormones or the water-soluble hormones, what they will do? They will help in synthesis of new proteins and enzymes. Enzymes are also proteins. So mainly their mechanism of action is on the nucleus. They will go into the nucleus. They will activate certain receptors. They will help in the transcription, translation process. Finally, a new protein or a new enzyme is synthesized. But what is the action of the water-soluble hormones? They are not helping in producing something new. They will modify the action of already existing proteins. Okay, they will just change their action, modify the action. Either they can amplify, either they can terminate. Okay, so these are the main important differences between the water-soluble hormones, lipid-soluble hormones. Water-soluble hormones, what are the examples? Water-soluble hormones like peptide hormones, amine hormones. What are the examples of the lipid-soluble hormones? All the steroid hormones and thyroid hormones. Okay, so with this successfully, in the first video, we have seen what are the differences between the two important groups of hormones. In the next video, we will discuss about the secondary messenger mechanisms. Hope the video is helpful. Thank you.